Shabbat Shalom. It's good to be back. Very good to be back. As many of you know, I was a teacher of English as a foreign language in Japan for a little over 3 years. And during that time, I learned to hate English. Not the teaching of it. The students were great. The actual classroom experience was great. But when students would ask questions about why English does some of the things English does, oftentimes there was no good answer, except for the fact that because English is stupid. It's just a crazy language, more so than almost any other language I've encountered. What's that? It's a big combination, which is a very polite way of saying that English has been made up of throwing together languages that had no business ever living together in the first place. But somehow, we've made it work. More or less. But there are still gaps. There are still holes in English, despite its vast, robust vocabulary, larger than any other language in the world, I might add. So, for example, if I were to ask you, what do you call a person who constantly tells lies, you would say, excellent, they are a liar, right? What do you call a person who constantly tells the truth? An honest one? A truther? No, that has a new connotation, unfortunately, in the 20th century. We don't have a word for anyone who actually tells the truth consistently. We've got a word for someone who lies, but not a word for someone who tells the truth. What do you call somebody who constantly cheats? A cheater. Okay. What do you call someone who never cheats? Honorable? Really? I did a great job playing Monopoly with you. You were an honorable player. That sounds natural. On the other hand, I hated playing Monopoly with you. You were a cheater. That sounds perfectly natural. Right? We don't have a single natural word for somebody who is honest all the time. What do we call somebody who always keeps their word? They make a promise, they follow through. What's that? Meticulous. Meticulous. Not bad. Actually, Judaism has another word that I can translate for you of what we call someone who always follows through on their promises no matter what. An idiot. That's what Judaism believes. If somebody always keeps their promises, no matter what, they are an idiot. Yes, we read a whole section at the beginning of today's Torah portion about keeping one's vows, about making an oath, following through on the oath, the importance of holding to that oath. We talked about the small exception for people who are not the head of household. But, by and large, the Torah seems to be making it very clear that a promise is a promise is a promise. And yet, in Jewish law, if you study how this section is understood and expanded upon, you would absolutely recognize what I am saying. A person who always, forever, will keep their word is an idiot. Because there are words that we give that we never should have given. There are vows we make that we regret the moment they leave our lips. And the alternative would be to hold a person responsible for those errors, either an error of misunderstanding, of making a promise or a vow based on misinformation, or an error of emotion, of making a vow or promise based upon the moment's flash of either excitement or anger or other emotions that overwhelmed us, to imprison a person behind their words forever and ever, and to force them to fulfill whatever has come out of their mouths. Now, indeed, there are some who would argue that this would be the best way to prevent people from talking stupid in the first place. If you hold a person liable all the way through, before God's judgment, or perhaps even in front of the state, for every single statement that comes out of their mouth, that if they make a promise, it will be adhered to the letter of what they said, then people might shut up a little bit more. People might be a little bit more careful before they open their mouth. This is perhaps, by using a punitive stick, a way of creating a does absolutely encourage that we hold our tongues, that we do not enter quickly into an oath, a vow, or a promise without duly considering what it is we are committing ourselves to. But Judaism also recognizes we're human beings. We're flesh and blood. We make mistakes. If it were possible to go through life without ever making a mistake, we would not need the path of tshuva, the path of repentance, to return and repair the breaches that we make. We would not need Yom Kippur. And so instead Judaism says, there's a way out. It's actually quite simple. In a sort of roundabout way, Judaism does not want to allow a person to break a vow, a promise, or an oath too casually. But it says, if you have made such an oath or a vow that is clearly not what was intended, there is a way to get out of it. You go to a Beit Din, which can even be made of ordinary people. You explain to them the vow that you made, and then they say, well, when you made the vow, did you anticipate X, Y, and Z as being a consequence of your vow? And almost invariably, there is some consequence to the words that you have uttered that was not on your mind at the time you made the vow. And so the Beit Din says, okay, your vow is annulled. Because your vow would have included all of this, but since that was not your intention, therefore you clearly, simply misspoke. Now you notice there are some important elements to this. It is not something you do just by yourself. If you make a vow, you make a promise, you make an oath, and you realize later on, I spoke rashly, I spoke hastily, or I spoke out of ignorance, just canceling it in your heart may seem like a good idea, but there is a problem. You will know that you have let yourself off the hook, but you will not know if you left yourself off the hook too easily. And that creates a pattern, a habit of allowing yourself to nullify your own commitments. Additionally, if you spoke in front of anyone else, they will now recognize that you are not holding to your word. And to act in such a faithless manner will be detrimental to you in the esteem that the community holds you in, as well as to the community by establishing that, well, he didn't keep his word, why should I keep mine? But even more importantly than this, it creates a sense of humility. That when a person appears before the Beit Din and says, I have made a mistake, I have spoken in error, and I need to have my vow annulled, they're saying, oops, I made a mistake. And they are doing this in a way that publicly acknowledges that they are fallible. They are not saying, it wouldn't be fair to keep me to this vow. They are not complaining. They are not haranguing. They are saying, the words got away from me. I didn't understand. I didn't think this happened beyond what I was ever expecting. Help. And the community helps. There is a very famous story of how this plays out or doesn't play out, and what it says about those in the community. You may remember from just last week's Torah portion of Pinchas, that Pinchas was given a reward for his zeal for God, of becoming a priest that would be almost eternal. And indeed, there is a midrash that says Pinchas went on living for hundreds and hundreds of years. He became a bit of a long-lived young man. And during the times of the Shoftim, during the times of the judges, there was a leader of our people, a Shofet, known as Yiftach. And Yiftach wasn't exactly cut from the finest cloth. He had many problems with his community. His own brothers had tried to drive him out of the house because he came from a mother they looked down upon. Not a good example of behavior at the time. But when they needed him to lead the war band, he came back on the condition that he could lead them in general. He parlayed his military expertise as being the head of bandits into becoming the head of state. And when he went off then finally to war, he decided to make a vow to show his commitment to God as he was about to enter this dangerous field. He said, God, when I return from war victorious, should you allow me to prevail, I will sacrifice whatever comes out to greet me. Right? He's not going to pick the cheap cow. He's not going to pick the cheap goat. If the prize-winning cow comes out, that will be his sacrifice. Can you see where this might be going if you're not familiar with the story? Dumbest vow ever. Because of course he wins, and of course he comes home, and of course what comes out to greet him? His daughter. His daughter. Now, there were problems with the vow to begin with. What if the animal that had come out to greet him, which clearly is what he was imagining, had been an animal that was not kosher? His horse comes out. His donkey. You can't sacrifice those. Would he have taken them to the altar? What if it had been an animal that had a blemish? Would he have been able to sacrifice it? Of course not. But for his daughter to come out, this, of course, was the worst possible situation. And what did Yiftach do? Well, according to the Midrash, what he should have done would have been to gone to Pinchas, to gone to the high priest, and said, oops, I spoke rashly. I made a vow and did not think through all the consequences. And Pinchas would have asked him, did you imagine ever that it would be a human being, let alone your daughter, that would be the subject of your vow? He said, of course, that wasn't what I was intending. Very well, your vow is nullified and canceled. May you and she and everyone live in peace. But Yiftach, says the Midrash, refused to go to Pinchas. Not because he didn't like his daughter, but because he considered himself to be the macher, to be the important person. Who was Pinchas to demand that Yiftach would go to him to have his vow nullified? Pinchas should come to him. Right? I'm the shofet, I'm the judge. You come to me, Mr. Priest. And Pinchas, for his part, unfortunately, he had the same attitude, which is to say, you're the one who said something stupid. You're the one who is not really of very good birth. You're the one who has trapped yourself in this situation. You come to me, and we'll take care of your vow. And so neither man budged, and she died. Often the way of things, when people allow pride to get in the way, that it is not only the people who are hurt, but the many other people that are hurt in the process. This is the humility that Judaism teaches us to carry. No matter who we are, no matter what we have said, if we have spoken in error, if we have made a mistake, if we have misunderstood a situation and now see it in a different light, then we have a remedy. The remedy relies upon us having humility, of having introspection, of having the ability to admit a mistake. But doing so is the foundation of our people. We do not ask for categorical fulfillment of every word that we speak because we know that much of what humans speak is gibberish and not worth fulfilling. But we do ask that the words be taken seriously, and that when we misspeak and when we are in error, we have the ability and the humility to admit these mistakes and then remedy them. This is, as we move through the stories of Tisha B'Av and the lessons of our failings of our ancestors in the destruction of the first and second temple, and as we then look in the 7 weeks that come afterwards towards the Yamim Noraim, the days of awe, and we begin the heavier, more in-depth examination of ourselves prior to Yom Hadin, the day of judgment. This is the spirit that should be moving us. What mistakes have we made? What corrections must we make? It takes greater strength to recognize these flaws. It takes greater commitment to God and our faith to overturn the foolish words that we have uttered. It will take much more from us to stand at Kol Nidrei, where we say that our vows are nullified, those that were meaningless and inappropriate, and to prepare ourselves for a new year, unshackled by the mistakes of the past. Shabbat Shalom.